Hello travelers, I am Epcot Ethan and welcome to another video. Today we will be examining possible source text for Disney's 1994 animated classic, The Lion King. Before we get into the source text, I feel like I need to describe the basic plot of The Lion King. Spoiler alert, though you have had more than 25 years to watch it. The Lion King tells the story of a lion called Simba. He was born to Mufasa, who is king of the Pride Lands, a fictional land where lions rule the savannah. He has an evil uncle named Scar, who has a scar on his face. This prestigious life collapses when his father is murdered by his uncle and the young lion is sent into exile. Years pass and he happens to meet an old childhood friend, Nala, who convinces him to return to the Pride Lands and overthrow Scar. He eventually does this and falls in love with Nala during the takeover. The first book, often cited as a possible source for this film, is Hamlet by the famous English playwright William Shakespeare. One can clearly see where people are coming from when they say this. A prince who wishes to retake his father's throne after an evil and murderous uncle usurps it, sees a vision of his father and falls in love with a woman he knew in childhood. However, the similarities really end there. Hamlet's mother remarries to his uncle, something that never occurs in The Lion King, and pretty much everyone dies in the end. While in The Lion King, Simba and Nala succeed and even have a baby together. The tones are also entirely different, Hamlet's tale being depressing and a tragedy, while Simba's is upbeat and generally lighthearted. The Lion King definitely is based on Hamlet. It was confirmed by the creators of the film as early as 1994. But they also mentioned two other source stories. The next two stories are taken from the Bible. I am a Christian, I grew up Christian, and thus I am well acquainted with the biblical stories of Joseph and Moses. With Joseph, I can see some similarities, sent to exile by his relatives, yes, though Joseph was sent by his brothers, not his uncle. But really else than that, I cannot think of any similarities at all. Joseph was kept in the house of a servant of Pharaoh, but then got accused of having an affair with this man's wife, and was thus sent to prison. From there he manages to get out when he interprets a dream that Pharaoh had. The story ends with Joseph's family joining him after a famine in the land of Israel. With Moses, I really do not see anything, else than perhaps the burning bush, which could correspond to Mufasa and Simba in the clouds. Moses does not even get a happy ending, dying before he reaches the promised land. In conclusion, I think the themes are similar, but I see little else than that. A possible fourth source is that of the historical lives of King Edward V and his brother Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York, also known as the Princes in the Tower, who would mysteriously disappear in the late summer or early autumn of 1483. For the sake of this comparison, I will need to tell a bit about the lives of these two unfortunate English royals. Edward was born in 1470, while his brother Richard would be born in 1473. They were the children of King Edward IV of England and Queen Elizabeth Woodville, from the Yorkist side of the Wars of the Roses. Their parents' marriages had been a real scandal because Edward had secretly married her, as she was too low-born to marry a king. She also had been a Lancastrian, the other faction of the Wars of the Roses. The whole affair is rather complicated, thus I will leave a link in the description of a good video that explains the wars in more detail. Elizabeth and Edward would have 10 children together, 7 girls: Elizabeth, Mary, Cecily, Margaret, Anne, Catherine, and Bridget, and 3 boys: Edward, Richard, and George. Of these 3 children, Mary, Margaret, and George would die young. In 1483, Edward IV dies. Officially, he died of pneumonia, but there were rumors that he had been poisoned. I would thus compare Edward to Mufasa. Edward V was now king. He would never be crowned. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, would take over the regency of King Edward, while his mother and sisters fled to a convent. Edward V and his brother Richard were held prisoners in the Tower of London from June 1483 onwards. In August, they disappeared from public view. You can definitely see the similarities by this point. A strong and mighty king dies in mysterious circumstances. His son's throne is usurped by an ambitious uncle with physical deformity. And after that, a young prince disappears. Another rather gross comparison is the comparison between the alleged betrothal of Richard III and Elizabeth of York, and the deleted scene discussing Scar and Nala. Most historians do not support the idea that Richard and Elizabeth were in love because that is just disgusting, and there is no evidence of this. But what was the final destiny of the princes? Their exact fate is unclear. It is possible the children were held there for several more months into the fall of 1483, possibly as late as October. Some say they were murdered by King Richard, who wanted to destroy any rival claimants to the throne. Others say English noble, the Duke of Buckingham, who did incite rebellion several months later. There have been other people alleged. Some even say Henry Tudor or Margaret Beaufort, who we will get into later, but I think those last two are definitely impossible to have murdered princes. In 1674, workmen in the Tower uncovered two partial skeletons of young boys. These two bodies were buried in Westminster Abbey under the names of Edward V and Richard of York. But as DNA testing has not been carried out on them, we cannot be sure. In 1789, two skeletons were found in the grave of Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville, these allegedly belonging to George and Mary, two of their children that died young. However, Mary and George's remains were already accounted for and discovered. Some allege that the boys did not die at all, but were instead exfiltrated to Burgundy, to the court of their aunt, Margaret of York, Dowager Duchess of Burgundy, who was regent for her step-grandson, Duke Philip. The two would have lived there until 1487, when Edward returned with his guardian, John de la Pole, and would have then died in battle. Richard would have reappeared as Perkin Warbeck. If you would like me to do a video investigating the possible fates of the princes, please comment such in the comment section below. However, perhaps the best comparison for Simba is, in fact, Henry VII himself, also known as Henry Tudor. Henry Tudor was the last Lancastrian heir who ended up fighting Richard III in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth. He would succeed and go on to marry Elizabeth of York, whom he had been betrothed to since 1483. They would have 7 children, including the future King Henry VIII. Yes, the one with 6 wives. I will link the video talking about the 3 most important women of this last part of the Wars of the Roses in the description, these being Elizabeth Woodville, Margaret Beaufort, and Elizabeth of York. I would also like to say that this is just my own personal theory. The creators might have been consciously or unconsciously inspired. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, and goodbye.